If you're a Barça fan and you're interested in Julián Álvarez joining Barça, keep watching because I'm going to tell you about a new problem that, according to sources close to the player, could prevent Julián from signing with Barça. And this time it's not Atletico de Madrid, it's not the price, it's not Simeone or financial fair play. The problem is called Real Madrid because in the last few hours, some information has started to circulate that has set off all the alarms in Barcelona. And not because Madrid urgently needs a striker, but because when Florentino Perez gets involved in the deal, everything changes, everything. And here comes the first important question of the video. If Barça has been working on signing Julián for months, why is Real Madrid suddenly being mentioned now? Because the answer could explain absolutely everything that's happening. But wait, because the most shocking thing isn't that Madrid shows up, the most shocking thing is the timing of their appearance. Right when Barça wanted to have the deal perfectly identified, right when Deco was focused on finding it, right at the economic formula, right when it seemed like the battle was only between Barça and Atletico de Madrid, and suddenly Florentino enters the scene. But calm down, nothing is closed yet, and Barça is still leading these negotiations. Real Madrid doesn't usually act on impulse, but when they study a deal, there's usually a reason behind it. And in this case, the reason seems obvious. Julián Álvarez is one of the most complete forwards in the world. For me, the only way I could see him signing for Real Madrid is if Kylian Mbappé or Vinicius ended up leaving the team, which I see as almost impossible right now. And it's true that Julián scores, that Julián assists, presses, works, and competes. And he also has something that coaches love, mentality and pressure. That's innate to him. That's why Hansi Flick likes him so much. And that's why any big club would keep a close eye on him in a situation like this. But here's an even more important question. Does Madrid really need Julián Álvarez? That's the question. That's what we, the coolers, and even the Madridistas, I think, ask ourselves. Because when you analyze the Madrid squad, a lot of doubts come up. And that could be the key to this whole story. Because it's one thing to need a player, and it's a very different thing to prevent your rival from signing him. And be careful with this, because modern football works like that too. Many times, big deals aren't driven only by sporting reasons, they're also driven by strategic ones. Barça knows this perfectly well. Because if Julián ends up wearing the Blaugrana shirt, the impact would be huge, huge. We're talking about a world champion, a forward in the prime of his football career. And a player who would fit in and pay attention to this perfectly with Lamine Yamal, with Pedri, or with Gordon, among others. Especially with Hansi Flick's style of play, unlike Simeone's, where I felt he wasn't used to his full potential. And this is exactly where something comes up that really worries Barcelona fans, because there's a huge difference between competing against Atletico and competing against Real Madrid. A gigantic difference. Because when Florentino decides to get involved in the deal, the financial scale changes. And the media pressure also changes. Even the difficulty of signing that player increases. Many Barca fans are asking the same question. Can Barca compete against Madrid in a financial battle? The answer is probably no. And that's precisely why the key wouldn't be about money. It would depend on the player's will, as we've seen this in the market for years. When a footballer has a clear priority, the deals change. And that's exactly what the Deco tries to achieve in any negotiation. But pay attention. Because here comes the detail that very few people are talking about. And it might be the most important of all. Because Barça is not just building a squad. They're building a project. And that's what can make the difference. Because when a player analyzes his future, he doesn't just look at the salary. He doesn't just look at the badge. He also looks at the sporting fit. And here, Julián would make a lot of sense. Because Flick wants a mobile striker who presses, someone who can attack spaces, someone who combines with the wingers. And if we think about similar profiles, Julián fits that description much better than many other names on the market. Therefore, my message to all of you Barça fans is that Julián Álvarez would still sign for Barça. But it's true that there's interest from Real Madrid, so this needs to be mentioned. But from my point of view, and according to what I'm reading, Julián Álvarez's signing for Barça is not in danger. Flick wants something different, as we've been saying. He wants dynamism, mobility, aggressiveness. Julián fits all of that. I mean, he's perfect for it. It's like a glove for him. That's why his name keeps coming up constantly, because he remains a top priority for many fans. And that's why Madrid's involvement is going to create, and is already creating, a lot of noise. But wait. There's something even more concerning for Barça, and it doesn't involve Florentino. It has to do with time, because with each passing week, the deal can become more complicated. More clubs getting information, more teams asking questions, more interested parties showing up, and that causes one thing: the market heats up, and when a deal gets too hot, prices go up. This is what we don't want, and that pressure also increases, and the margins disappear. That's why Deco wants clarity, that's why Flick wants certainty, and that's why Barça is trying to move forward as soon as possible in the important deals, not just Julián's. Also in the rest of the moves that can define the summer. Because here comes another fundamental question. And what if Julián doesn't end up coming? Does the project fall apart? The answer is no. And it's very important to understand this. Because Barça can't build a summer around just one player. That would be a huge mistake. In fact, the sports management has been working on different scenarios for months. Different profiles and alternatives. Because a big club can never depend exclusively on one deal. Never. Now that doesn't mean Julián isn't special, because he is. Very much so, in fact. He is likely one of the forwards who best fits the football Hansi Flick wants to build. And here's something that many Barça fans probably aren't fully appreciating. The real news is that Barça is trying to compete for players of this level. And that completely changes the perception of the club in Europe. Because a few years ago, many said that Barça would never fight for big names again. That the club had already lost its appeal, that it couldn't compete anymore. And yet, today we're talking about Gordon. We're even talking about Bernardo Silva, about Julián Álvarez, about a project that excites people again. And that, fellow Barça fans, is the most important thing. Because it shows that Barça is thinking big again. But the best is yet to come. Because if this transfer window has taught us anything, it's that there are still many chapters ahead. And let me tell you something. Barça is still in pole position. It's still Julián Álvarez's favorite and preferred destination. Nothing has changed here, friends of Barça Hoy. Julián Álvarez still wants to go to Barça and is still waiting. Summer can change everything, that's true. And when there's a negotiation, it's normal for people to be nervous. More than one person is nervous. But this battle, this sporting, media and institutional battle, we'll see how it ends. Because the next few weeks could be decisive. Because Barça knows it needs to take a competitive step forward. And above all, because Flick wants to build a team capable of fighting for the Champions League again. And because Julián Álvarez represents exactly the kind of player who can change the level of a squad. Now the big question is something else. Is it just noise, or are we witnessing the beginning of a war between Barça and Madrid for one of the most sought-after strikers in European football?